Welcome to the third segment of this online presentation of Financial Statements Made Easy, presented by the Small Business Development Center at Columbia Gorge Community College. In this portion of the presentation, we will use different financial ratios to demonstrate what we can learn from the information contained in the balance sheet and income statement. Again, this presentation is one portion of our Financial Statements Made Easy course, so please visit the Columbia Gorge Community College website for information on enrolling in the entire program. This website will be provided later in the presentation. Before we begin, let's review some important points we must consider when using financial statements. Financial statements must be accurate and timely to provide value to the business owner. Incomplete or inaccurate financial statements are of little use to the business and will not allow the business owner or lender to see the true financial position of a company. Financials can be historical based on past performance or projected based on future expectations. Both historical and projected financials may be required when applying for a business loan. It is also a good idea to learn how to complete projected financial statements anytime you are considering a change with your business, such as a building expansion, hiring new employees, or acquiring new equipment. You should know how these types of events will impact the financial health of a company. We will not be able to get a full understanding of the financial position of a company by looking at only one financial statement. We must use both the balance sheet and income or profit and loss statements. Once we have complete and accurate financial statements, we can use key figures from each financial statement to calculate different financial ratios. These ratios allow us to understand the relationship between different figures on both financial statements. We can also use these ratios to make comparisons with industry peers and determine if we are on par with our peers or possibly losing money due to the financial management of our business. In the course activities, we will demonstrate how to make these comparisons and determine the potential financial impact. Another thing we can do with financial ratios is to compare prior periods of our own business to uncover and understand positive or negative trends. Remember that a ratio describes the relationship between two numbers regardless of their size. Many of these ratios will use information from both financial statements. As we look at these ratios, we will put each of these ratios into an easy-to-understand sentence that will describe the real meaning of the result. We will do this with several of these ratios during this presentation. Each result will be stated as, for every x of what's on the bottom, we have x of what's on top. This will make sense as we work through some examples. If you are enrolled in the full online course, you will also complete several exercises where we will calculate each of these ratios using financial statements from a sample business. The goal of this presentation is to present and define these additional financial terms and concepts. A better understanding of how these apply to a business will be gained when we complete the course exercises later. In the next several slides, we'll look at the specific financial ratios we will use in this course. After this presentation, you will be directed to complete activities which will require you to calculate each of these ratios for the sample business we will analyze. For now, we will just define these ratios starting with the current ratio. The current ratio looks at the relationship between current assets and current liabilities. You will remember that the term current represents things that can be converted to cash or needs to be paid within 1 year. The current ratio indicates if a company has adequate current assets to cover current liabilities. If this ratio is below 1, it would show that a business does not have the liquidity to meet their current obligations. For example, a healthy business may have a current ratio of 2 to 1. If we put this ratio into a sentence, we would say that this business has $2 of current assets for every dollar of current liabilities. If the ratio was less than 1, or for example 0.75, we would say that this business has 75 cents of current assets to cover every dollar of current liabilities. The next ratio that looks at the ability of a business to pay its near-term commitments is the quick ratio. This ratio is similar to the current ratio, but determines if a company can use its most liquid assets, such as cash and receivables, to pay current liabilities without selling off any inventory. A healthy business may have a quick ratio of 1 to 1, or have at least $1 of cash and receivables for every dollar in current liabilities. These ratios are both referred to as liquidity ratios and are often used by a lender to determine if a business can meet their short-term obligations when applying for a loan. The debt-to-equity ratio looks at the relationship between the total liabilities and equity of a company. This ratio indicates what proportion of equity and debt the company is using to finance assets. This is often a measure of the riskiness of a company. If the ratio is greater than 1, it indicates mostly debt financing. Less than 1 would show that the business is financing assets with equity. For example, a business with a debt-to-equity ratio of 2 to 1 would indicate that $2 of debt was used for every dollar of equity. This could also be stated as the business is using $2 of someone else's money to finance the business for every dollar they're able to put in themselves. Next, the gross profit margin is a commonly used and understood ratio that illustrates the pricing policy of a company. This ratio is often stated as a percentage, and I'm sure most of you have heard this stated in a statement like, the gross profit margin on selling an item is 40%. This would mean that for every dollar of sales, the company made 40 cents of gross profit. This ratio is very useful when finding which product lines of a business are the most or least profitable, and also useful when you try to set the pricing strategy of your company. The net profit margin is another commonly used ratio and is similar to gross profit margin, except that it calculates the profit margin of a business after all expenses. The net profit margin shows the true bottom line profit margin of a company. A company with a 10% net profit margin would earn 10 cents of net profit for every dollar of sales. The next ratio is the sales to assets ratio. This calculates the amount of sales generated from each dollar of assets. Businesses purchase more assets with the hopes of generating more sales, and this ratio can help you track how effective you are at doing this. For example, if this ratio calculated to be 0.5, you would know that you're generating 50 cents of sales for every dollar of total assets owned by the business. Return on assets takes the previous ratio further and calculates the return a company is generating on assets. It is important to track that your assets are contributing towards profit. This ratio shows us the relationship between net profit and the assets of a business. A return on assets ratio, or as it's commonly called an ROA, of 5% would indicate that for every dollar of total assets owned by the company, they are generating 5 cents of net profit. Return on investment is a ratio that is used to determine the return a business gets from the equity they put into the company. This ratio can help determine if a project is worth proceeding with by calculating the rate of return you can expect from the equity you will inject into the project. An ROI of 10% would indicate that the company earns 10 cents of net profit for every dollar of equity invested. Inventory turnover will calculate how many times inventory is sold and replaced over a period of time. This period of time is normally 1 year. This ratio will calculate how efficient a company is at managing their inventory levels. For example, if our inventory turnover ratio was 4, it would indicate that this company has sold and replaced inventory an average of 4 times a year. By taking this ratio one step further, we can convert the turnover ratio into days. Using this same example with an inventory turnover ratio of 4, we can calculate that this business holds an item in inventory for nearly 91 days before it is sold. We can also apply the same concept to the accounts receivable of a business to see how well a company collects debts owed to them. This is an important ratio because a business wants to be sure to track how long it is taking for them to collect on accounts receivable and then convert their accounts receivable into cash when they receive payment. A business with an accounts receivable turnover of 5 would indicate the business collects their receivables in full 5 times a year. If we can convert this into days, we would see a collection period of nearly 73 days. In other words, it takes this business 73 days to collect on their outstanding accounts receivable. Accounts payable is the final account type that we will apply this concept to. Using these ratios will show the rate at which a business pays back its suppliers. This can be calculated into a turnover ratio and then converted to days. Please take a moment to review the examples on this slide. After calculating these financial ratios, we can then compare ourselves with our industry peers. Benchmark financial data for most companies are available through a variety of different resources. I would recommend checking with your local Small Business Development Center office to obtain this information for your business type. They have access to current RMA data as well as other resources. BizStats.com is a website that can provide some of this information as well. I've also seen financial ratio benchmarks in various trade journals specific to the industry the publication covers. The next step is to use this information to determine the financial impact of being on par or out of line with industry standards. During the course, we will complete a financial impact worksheet to see how this process works. A copy of this worksheet has been provided in the course materials. This process will assist you with identifying problem areas in your business and allow you to take steps to correct these issues. Some of these issues can be due to both financial and managerial decisions made by the business. In the end, it will be up to you and your resources to treat the financial condition of your business. This concludes this online presentation. Please visit this website to learn more about enrolling in this and additional courses. If you are a student viewing this presentation, please continue with the remainder of the online class, and as always, if you have additional questions or comments, please post them in the questions forum.